Alongside the release of Phase 2, Blizzard have pushed tons of new runes and class changes for testing. And we cannot access this PTR ourselves, but that doesn't mean it hasn't been data mined. Now, in regards to Phase 3, it would have been nice if we found out everything in real time, but Agren did explain why they're putting so much on the PTR in the first place, saying things such as some of them will be real, referring to the runes of course, and some of them will be experimental and won't be used. He also mentioned having no PTR runs a much higher risk come launch date, and finally he said basically if you don't want spoilers, don't click on things which say data mining, and hopefully from the title and thumbnail here, I've made it pretty clear what the content of this video is going to be. Nevertheless, today I'm going to be talking about data mined runes for Phase 3, which are expected to go on the 2 new rune engraving slots on your helm and wrist. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Boot.dev. Boot.dev gives ambitious, self-motivated individuals the tools they need to get fully on board with Python and Go programming languages. What sets it apart is that it treats the learning process like an RPG, with goals, experience, and achievements. This allows you to both stay engaged with the topic you are on, as well as tracking what you've done so far. Boot.dev believes in a hands-on learning experience, and one of the main things they want to get you doing on your learning journey is writing tons of your own code, so you can really get a first-hand understanding of what works and why. But even if you just want to check out Boot.dev before committing, it is really risk-free. All the content is free to read and watch in guest mode, and there's a 30-day no questions asked refund policy, as well as a free demo on every course and its interactive features. Back-end development is often a career with high earnings and remote work positions too, so why not give it a try? Click the link in the description box and use my code WillE to get 25% off your first payment for Boot.dev. That's 25% your first month or your first year, depending on the subscription you choose. Many thanks to Boot.dev for the sponsor today. Let's get back to WoW. So mages are looking very promising for the future in Season of Discovery after having looked through all the potential runes, and some of them are totally new abilities that I don't believe we've ever seen in the game before, and those runes are always my favourite ones to see. Balefire Bolt is a new casted ability which deals spell fire damage, that's arcane plus fire, and each cast will increase the damage of your Balefire Bolt by 10%, but will also decrease your spirit by 10%. And here's the crazy part. If your spirit ever reaches 0, your character immediately dies. It reminds me of Surrender to Madness, at least the version that Shadow Priest had at the start of Legion, in that you've got this super powerful ability, but the downside is a literal death, saying that the spirit reduction on the spell is a percentage. So realistically, it's not going to be possible to mess this up, unless you get to 9 stacks and think, you know what, I'm just going to send another bolt in. This spell very well could be real, but I have a feeling that if it is, the drawback will need to be amended in some way to make it a bit more threatening. Another totally new spell is Temporal Anomaly. This will be aimed more towards the arcane healers, I would imagine. It fires an orb that will grant all party members a shield every 2 seconds, only on a 1-minute cooldown. It does depend a lot on how much it can absorb, but certain fights may well benefit from this persistent shielding effect. Imagine if you can fire off this orb into a corner and it can't move forward, so it just sits there refreshing a shield. Or maybe in Warsong Gulch, when moving forwards carrying a flag, having this shield follow you all the way would be kind of nice. Warlocks very well may have an upgraded demon to look forwards to in the future in the shape of the Felguard. This demon, initially introduced during TBC, was the capstone talent for demonology, but in Season of Discovery, with runes working the way which they do, any Warlock would be able to learn this powerful summon. It's hard to think that this won't be the go-to demon for everyone if it does make its way into the game, and even if you aren't going down the demonology tree to buff up your pet, it's still going to be pretty good. And let's face it, Warlock pets in general are more there for support. They're not there to tank and do damage, as Beast Mastery pets are. Maybe this changes with the Felguard though. Also, Datamined was Pandemic. This is a simple rune that does something a lot of us have been considering and asking for some time. It makes your damage over time effects crit. And the tooltip also has Unstable Affliction on it, which was also indeed Datamined for a future phase. This is definitely going to make Warlocks a much bigger threat in PvP content, but may also provide the turning point for Affliction to begin seeing play in PvE as well. Priests have had some truly weird and wonderful runes which have been data mined. First up is Smite Priest could actually be a thing with the new Surge of Light rune. So in the Burning Crusade, a talent with the same name was brought into the game. As you can see here, it's a 50% chance on spell crit for your next smite to be instant cast, but it cannot crit. There used to be an earlier version of this proc where it could crit, and if you got lucky, you could just get these back-to-back-to-back smite crits. It was kind of like the caster version of Wind Fury. So this Datamined version we have at the moment then is very powerful. It procs from any spell crit, affects a bunch of spells, and doesn't specify that the proc cannot crit itself. So if you've had dreams of making Smite Priest a real thing, in Phase 3, maybe it'll be worth a go. Similar to Warlocks, it looks as though Priest may also be getting a rune which will allow their damage over time effects to crit. The Despair rune simply says your periodic effects can now be critical strikes. So not only would this apply to currently known dots such as Shadow of Pain or Void Plague, or even the undead specific Devouring Plague, but future ones too, if there are indeed new ones. Who knows, Vampiric Touch has been a crowd favourite damage over time effect for a very long time. Maybe it'll make its way back into the game, maybe not, we'll see. This would help the typically damage over time heavy class scale a little bit better. Onto Rogue, and Rogue are getting some better ways to regenerate energy tied to one of their helm runes. Focused attacks is a simple enough ability that makes it so you regain 2 energy every time you crit with a melee or ranged attack. Now during Wrath of the Lich King there was this interaction with Fan of Knives and Fell Striker, where if you were hitting enough enemies, you were basically guaranteed to proc the effect of Fell Striker, and because everything would crit, every time you'd use your AoE, your energy bar would refill, thanks to focused attacks. In Season of Discovery, rogues now have Shuriken Toss as an AoE. It is target capped though, so I don't think it's going to be nearly as good as Fan plus Fell Striker, but maybe it could make some okay AoE DPS or full threat as a tank. Though at this point, seeing how the balance is on Shuriken Toss, it's probably going to need a bit of a buff before it starts to do anything noteworthy. Honor Among Thieves was also datamined, and this is a crazy powerful version of it. Whenever a party member crits, you gain 1 combo point against your current target, with only a 1-second internal cooldown. If this is real, rogues are going to have more combo points than they know what to do with, especially if you're grouping up with maybe warriors or hunters, as their pet and the hunter themselves should both be able to contribute towards Honor Among Thieves. In fact, early on in Wrath of the Lich King, original Wrath of the Lich King this is, there was a bug and or interaction, whichever way you want to look at it, where you could stack a full party with rogues, and each rogue would give the others combo points when they crit with Honor Among Thieves. So you could stack 5 rogues in a group and all 5 would get 5 combo points basically every single global, and they could just spam eviscerate the entire fight. I don't know if that sounds too good of an idea to bring back for Season of Discovery. Blizzard probably don't want to do that, but at the same time it would be kind of funny to see. Druids are getting some buffs to Hurricane by the looks of things, and they certainly need it. Gale Winds will increase the damage of Hurricane by 100%, removes its cooldown, and reduces its mana cost by 20%. You know an ability was bad when they have to go that far to make it seem reasonable. This should make Boomies, or, just Druids in general, decent on larger AoE pulls, an area where previously they can't really do anything. Its mana cost is still on the high end, but it's better than nothing, isn't it? For Ferals, the Gore rune was datamined. This makes it so Lacerate, Maul, or Swipe have a 15% chance to reset the cooldown on Mangle Bear. Okay, so Feral players will know that this tooltip doesn't really make sense, as Mangle and Lacerate share a rune slot. Does this mean potentially for the future they're considering swapping those around? Because I know a big issue that bears have had so far is that these 2 key threat generating abilities are on the same rune. So hopeful, fingers crossed here, is that something will be changed here for the future. If you're a cat, this rune makes it so Mangle or Shred have a 5% chance to reset the cooldown on Tiger's Fury. Of course, Tiger's Fury is now a great DPS cooldown once you have the King of the Jungle rune, so despite it being a fairly low proc chance, this is still pretty good if it goes off. Hunters only had 2 future runes datamined, the first of which is TNT. This makes it so damage from explosive shot and damaging traps do 10% more damage. We do have Trap Launcher in the game, so you can send off your fire traps from distance and they have their own cooldown, but we need a rune that makes the traps themselves actually do some kind of relevant damage before we can start thinking about adding percentage increases, because at the moment they're just very weak. Perhaps we may even see new traps in the future though, that could always be an option. If you're more of a pet enjoyer, we also had Focus Fire Datamined. This rune consumes your frenzy stacks, giving you up to a 15% attack speed buff and restoring some focus to your pet. It also mentions a new version of frenzy on the tooltip. In this version, your pet gains frenzy each time they do a basic attack, granting 6% attack speed, stacking up to 5 times. This is worth a mention because we already have a frenzy talent in the BM tree as well, where they have a percentage chance to gain extra attack speed after critting. Maybe we have both of these exist at the same time and it only consumes one of them, or maybe this means you have 5 more talent points to spend somewhere else if you're going all the way down the Beast Mastery tree. Either way, whatever happens here, this is just a 15% attack speed buff more or less, which should at least fit well into marksmanship builds. So Shamans were the only class in the game to have literally 0 runes datamined for phase 3 in the level 50 bracket. But given the recent class changes Shaman have received, I'm not even sure what more they could get to make them better. As a tank, they're in a great spot, having good damage reduction, excellent single target threat, and top tier AoE threat generation as well. Elemental has started to scale up given a few more resets of gear, and we're really seeing what they're capable of doing now in both PvE and PvP. And Enhancement has gone from 0 to hero. This was the least played DPS class in vanilla by a huge margin, and now it's a top 3 DPS class. Restoration is probably the least serviceable Shaman spec, but they're still good and they have great utility and Wind Fury Totem, so it's not as though people are going to pass you up just for playing Resto. As for future runes, Two-Handed Enhancement is still not anywhere near as good as Dual Wield in PvE, however it's fine enough in PvP where you can purge debuffs off a squishy target, hit Storm Strike, get a few crits, get a Wind Fury proc and just delete them. I kinda do still want to see Two-Handed as an option in PvE, so maybe they could get more dedicated rune support here. Elemental and Tank Shaman both seem kinda just fine in the state they are at the moment. Maybe they could get some more utility in the future, such as Capacitor Totem. This was introduced in Legion and stuns nearby targets after a few seconds. Or maybe Spirit Walker's Grace from Cataclysm. This one allows you to cast spells while moving for a little bit. For Restoration, I thought they would have had Riptide by now at level 40. Maybe that's going to be waiting for you at level 50 though. In either event, if you're playing a Shaman right now, let me know what runes you want to see at level 50. For Warrior, Blizzard appear to be doubling down on the idea that protection or just tank spec warriors will be rocking a shield throughout Season of Discovery, or at least they're going to try and make you do so. Sword and Board makes it so Devastate and Revenge have a 30% chance of resetting the cooldown on Shield Slam and reducing its rage cost by 100%. And with how Devastate's been nerfed at the moment, maybe this is going to be a good thing. On the other hand, I don't remember Shield Slam being too good in vanilla. Then again, when did anyone actually play a deep prot warrior? All the warriors I remember were Fury prot, so maybe I'm underrating it a bit. Shield Mastery adds a further 10% flat damage to the warrior whilst they have a shield equipped, and reduces the duration of disarm effects by 50% as well, so just even more flat damage for protection here. Also, whilst we don't have anything along the lines of a gladiator stance which has been datamined, yet at least, this is kind of getting in that direction. And again, even though the one button Devastate warrior build was nerfed, maybe we can start to piece together something else in a later phase. For Paladin, their spells are gonna do damage. Purifying Power reduces the cooldown on Exorcism and Holy Wrath by 50%, and also makes it so Holy Wrath can be cast on any target, but it will now stun undead and demons for 2 seconds. Holy Wrath's base damage is actually not half bad, and with this rune it will have a 30-second cooldown. Keep in mind though, it still has a 2-second cast time in Classic though. Still, this will add up nicely if you need a bit of burst AoE in your rotation. The cooldown reduction on Exorcism is nice and everything, but it feels like there's already so many ways to reset this ability. Did we really need a cooldown reduction on it as well? Maybe not. Wrath makes it so your consecration ticks can crit. On top of that, Exorcism, Holy Shock, Holy Wrath, and Consecration will all gain spell crit equal to your melee crit chance. Consecration might actually do some relevant damage more than tickling enemies now with this rune. Honestly, Paladins are looking like one of the more interesting classes in Phase 3 for me so far, given all the future runes that we've seen, but we'll see how they end up being. And those are just some of the runes we have seen so far for the next phase. Of course, there's going to be way more runes than this in Phase 3, and this is still very early. Any of them could undergo big changes. But if you wanted a sneak peek at the future, then this may just be what we end up getting. Let me know what you think about these runes, which ones you'd want to see in the game down below, and if you made it to the end, drop a sub on the channel because I'll be breaking down and covering all major Season of Discovery updates right here. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you on the next one very soon.